turn this actually over to Dr. Bogan, who will introduce Allied Facility Partners.
Yes. So earlier this year, as part of referendum planning and facility planning, we engaged Allied Facility Partners to do a facility assessment. It was primarily focused on Kaneland High School, but did also include other buildings and other items that were included in the referendum. And so tonight we actually have Doug McMahon, the CEO of Allied Facility Partners, here to present. So I'll call you up here. We have a clicker for you. But he is going to go through the current conditions of facilities, recommended upgrades, role of geothermal, LED lighting, and improving efficiency. He'll talk about some cost estimates, potential savings from various improvements, also financial considerations both with and without the referendum. So I will turn this over to Mr. McMahon.
Thank you very much. With me tonight is Alex Kunkel and Jonathan Arnsma. They're two of the team of 8 that we actually had involved in this process, so it's very thorough. One of the challenges that I think a lot of districts face when they're trying to pass a referendum is a lot of the budgeting that gets put together is historically done through an architectural firm. And a lot of that budgeting is done on square foot basis and things like that. And if you've ever built a home, if you said, hey, we're going to build a 3,000 square foot house, what's it going to cost? There's so many factors that go into that can impact it. And so unfortunately what tends to happen is budgets get put together that are wildly inaccurate because all the details haven't really gone through it. So that's part of what we do. We actually go through, we bring contractors in. When we looked at the mechanical systems of this building, Alex, who's got 40 plus years experience installing every kind of mechanical system you can imagine, he was leading that effort. So we looked at each piece of the project exactly how you would normally bid it once you had plans and specifications, as opposed to trying to chunk things into square foot pricing. Mark, by the way, was incredible, helpful in getting us information, walking our teams through. Thank you so much for that. So as we started going through the various pieces here, we did primarily focus on the high school, but we looked at, is this how I control the clicker thing here? No, strike.
It might need to be turned on. There's like a...
Is it? Oh, that would be great.
This is where I shine.
Awesome.
There we go.
Okay. So as we were going through looking at all these different components, we obviously looked at the referendum and the scopes of work that were laid out there. I will say that we kind of went a little bit above some of those items. So we included some windows that were not part of it. We included more parking lots than what was initially thought of. But the way that we were looking at the spaces, so if you had interior spaces that had, it would say renovate this space. What we did, instead of just putting a big cost per square foot for that space, is we looked at the floors as part of the rest of the flooring that we looked at for the entire building. We looked at the ceiling tiles, the lights, electrical, mechanical, all of those things were actually factored in throughout the building. So now the only pieces you're talking about for the renovation of those spaces are demoing walls, building some new walls, or how you're going to, casework, which we even have casework accounted for in here. So we were really, it's as detailed as you can get without having final construction drawings. The other thing that was a big deal was looking at learning environment, and part of that deals with the mechanical system. So there's a fair portion of it that we were able to figure out ways to utilize a geothermal solution, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. But the impact, and this is usually missed in a lot of these conversations, when people talk about a learning environment, there are, obviously you want the curriculum to be great, you want fantastic teachers, But that environment, and what this means is the ventilation. So what this impacts is the level of CO2 that's in a classroom. The higher level the CO2 is, the less oxygen it is. So this impacts student learning. Noise from ventilation is another major factor. The lighting that is in classrooms, especially if they're fluorescent lights actually have a strobing effect to them. Causes headaches. There's a lot of other negatives to it. Plus I don't know if you've heard of the temperature of a light. So temperature deals with kelvins, and what you'll find is this particular, or that aspect of it impacts circadian rhythm within an individual. What's interesting is all this stuff is, it's biology. It's not, crazy science. It's real stuff. So the circadian rhythm actually gets messed up when you're in classrooms that have levels like at 3,500, which is pretty normal. So by replacing those lights with LED lights and increasing the temperature of those lights, which makes it appear more white, you're actually creating an environment that keeps students more alert. These are actually used in special education spaces as well. If you've ever seen blue felt above a light or on a light, you go with a higher Kelvin. They use tunable lights a lot for those, but it allows you to adjust that. So now you've got lighting, you have CO2, you have ventilation. These are things that if you dial them in, the biggest study that I've ever seen, and I was telling Mark this earlier, I was a psych major in college, so I dig into these case study stuff, and most people get bored with it. I like it. But the largest study I've ever seen that took those components and optimized them in a classroom increased the learning progression for those students by 20%. So regardless of the curriculum, regardless of how great the teachers are in that room, if you can get those things dialed in, you actually improve the learning. And it's fact. So a lot of people look at these types of things and go, well, you're just making it prettier. You're just, I didn't have air conditioning when I was in school. Who needs it? It's huge. It is very, very impactful. So those are some of the things that we did look at. Let's see if I get this right. There you go. The aesthetics thing is kind of neat. In Vegas, they put the crazy carpet down. You know why? So they don't want you looking down. They want you looking up into the stuff. So anyway, all kinds of tricks. There's a list of all the things that we actually evaluated as we went through this process. Geothermal and lighting, while it costs a little bit more money in your initial installation of it, what's nice is because parking lots are part of this project, the geothermal well field would be actually underneath the parking lot. So you're not spending extra money to tear it up and put a new parking lot down. It's happening anyway, so you get that benefit. But right now, there's a federal, it used to be a privately held tax credit that if you didn't pay taxes, you couldn't benefit. That changed a few years ago, and it's now became something that school districts can benefit from. And this impacted things like solar and geothermal. And we did a project in the Quad Cities on a small school district, and I think the entire project was $7 million. And that's not just we actually did 2 additions. The actual increase in cost for the geothermal was about $1.5 million. Because of how the program is structured, we were able to submit with the school district. They were able to get $1 million back from the government, and it's a check. It's not, obviously you're not paying taxes, so it doesn't impact that. So you get a big rebate that used to not be available to you. The other benefit is the energy savings associated with geothermal. And there are some constructability issues that we would still need to evaluate a little bit to see if there's ways to get even more geothermal throughout the building. But the energy savings is huge. And so the cost difference of geothermal is actually offset immediately by the rebate alone. not to mention the energy savings that you're now going to get as a benefit from this. Same thing with the lighting. There's some significant lighting rebates that are available. And because you're going to an LED light, now you're not spending the time and the maintenance on replacing those light bulbs. So you're getting some of that savings, plus the energy consumption is far, far less. All of this also gets incorporated into things like building automation systems where you're able to control the ventilation levels in areas more effectively, more efficiently. So for example, a gym, a lot of times the way they're designed, you're ventilating that gym like it's full. Well, it's not full most of the time. So you're able to do things like demand control that actually pick up the CO2 levels within the space and then adjust the ventilation to accommodate for the number of people that are in that space. Again, huge savings. So a lot of this stuff is not just going to improve that learning environment, it's going to save you money down the road. Actually, immediately save you money. But you could tell from that list that we went through tons of stuff. Now, some of the things that were a little bit more difficult, things like the field house or structures that don't really have a design yet, those were a little tougher for us to estimate, but we still did that as well. And the good news is, which is, I mean, this is great news, that the budget that you had, that had been put together, I believe Wold did it, one or the other, but it works. It's a good number. And to me, that's a big deal. I know there's a school district that just passed a $30 million referendum, and they didn't go through a process like you've gone through. And now that they are going through it, they found out that the cost is closer to $38 million. So you don't have to worry about that. I say that with the only caveat being I have no idea what the whole tariff thing is going to do, but we've even talked through with Doctor on the idea that if you're able to pass a referendum, what are some strategies to lock in numbers? And it could be things like pre-purchasing equipment before you even have to install it. That way you have the equipment. You're not worried about a 20% increase or 25% increase on some of that. Mechanical is going to be the place that it gets hit the most because of the steel component of it. So these are all the little things that we've looked at. And I already kind of talked a little bit about the rebates and energy. But Dr. Rowling gave me a 10-minute cap, so I'll stop now. Which is good for me. But I'm happy to answer questions, and I've got these two gentlemen here to assist me.
I'm just curious because I hear a lot about the boilers. If the referendum doesn't go through, I mean, we have always had the number of like 250,000 per boiler. I mean, from what you've seen and what I see, and I'm not an expert in it, what is your estimate of that cost? What is the time frame for for that to come in if we have an emergency in the winter? And again, this is the referendum doesn't go through. How bad is it back there?
Well, I can tell you that the lead time on large equipment right now is 26 to 30 weeks. So
if the referendum did not pass, we had an emergency breakdown in the winter, that would be a major issue.
It would be major. That is correct.
I mean, having examined it, what is the life span on that? What's left? I mean, is it on spitting dust right now? I mean, where's that at?
Well, Alex, you had a better eyes on the boilers, so.
The boilers, like, what is the life of those?
Yeah.
Sir, do you mind if you come up to the mic? Only because people.
I'm hot seat now.
Now I look
People
short.
are gonna do the microphone.
All right, we can do that.
Yeah, I don't think they're in great shape, but.
Yeah, so I think it's a 1958 boiler. That one's pretty far down the road, so I mean, it could, anything catastrophic with that could happen at any time. And it desperately needs to be replaced. It's an energy hog. The other two boilers, which are like 2003, the other two boilers, 2003, they're in pretty good shape, but again, they're energy hogs, and they're due to be replaced. Lifespan is about 20 years that you're looking at. You got the one that's the 1958, which is like the Titanic in your mechanical room. So but both are really in need of replacement. You don't want to get yourself in that position where you have to shut the school down because you had a catastrophic event happen where the boilers failed. But that big one would probably be my focus.
What would you estimate the cost? I mean, is $250,000 a good estimate to replace that?
Plus, yeah.
Plus, and then, yeah.
The problem when you hear estimates is what they're doing is they're looking at just the piece of equipment. And a lot of times what they don't factor in is the demolition of the existing, the building automation or controls that have to go with it, the electrical that has to go with it. And then you've got engineering costs and all this. I mean, really by the time you're done, that $250,000 boiler is more like $400,000. So that's part of the challenge with it too.
So in this process too, are you looking to replacing all of them? That's
Yeah.
you did say 20 years, and that's a 2002-3. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So you're gutting it all out.
Yeah, we're doing boilers, pumps, we're going to rebuild the mechanical room basically. There's some components that will stay because some components just don't wear out. But we were careful to pay attention to those components, and in our budget pricing, we tried to budget, what's needed, not things that aren't needed. And there are some components that just, they just last forever. There's no need to go through and replace those. So we try to be responsible with your money.
So if a project starts like this summer, you're talking not until maybe early spring by the time you get the equipment, or do you order that? So
We could probably, as Doug said, when you talk to a vendor, it's, you're 20 weeks plus out. But once you place the order, you get in line, those usually get a little bit better, but it's a roll of the dice. You just don't know until you place the order. It could be 20 weeks, it could be 10 weeks. You got to get in line.
but it's like dire need to get that replaced this year.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I mean, it's to his point, it's when you're kind of rolling the dice
Yeah.
every year. And I think the other piece is to put some redundancy with those, so you're not. It allows you to operate boilers more efficiently when you have multiple that are smaller, which is great. But you also have that redundancy that's now built in that you didn't have before. And we do. I will tell you, we are. Used to be a joke at our house because it's like every time we would call an HVAC company, you can almost count on something. It's time to replace it. That seemed to be the message you always got back. We don't approach it like that. We really do try to find opportunity. I don't think there's a school district, maybe there's one or two, in the state of Illinois that has more money than they need. So you're always trying to optimize your dollars. So how do you not waste money? And that was one of the kind of the marching orders that we received, even when it talked about windows, was look at the windows, see where these things need to be actually replaced because they're in horrible shape, not just fluffy stuff, but stuff that needs to happen. So that was part of it.
And as far as like the other elementary schools, the HVAC systems are decent, besides like Blackberry Creek needing AC.
Yeah, we didn't.
Or did you just do the high school?
Yeah, we really focused on the high school. Obviously, we'd be happy to do that as well and to look at those, but since that wasn't a primary component of the referendum, and I mean, there's still some things that are happening at those schools as well, of course, but we didn't go through it in the same level of detail that we did with the high school.
Concerning the geothermal, I have two questions. Number one, I think last time we spoke, we didn't even know if we were eligible based on.
We didn't know if it would be a good fit. Like, my understanding is it's not easy to retrofit every building for geothermal, and so that was part of the investigation that Allied did.
You need to determine that it would be feasible for us to proceed in that
Not
direction?
the entire, so it's a little bit of a complicated answer because there's definitely a lot, there's parts of the building that would be very, very difficult to change to geothermal. You don't have to have just a geothermal system. So there are parts of the school that are much tougher to get to. The question starts to become, as you start to dive into it, what is the additional cost of making it happen there versus what's the rebate that you can get and what's the energy savings associated with it. So it gets a little bit more complicated as we dig into it, but we did really investigate the areas that we felt were made the most sense and even stretch that a little bit But the next step would be ultimately to really dive into it a little bit more deeper and start running those numbers and providing that back to you.
My second question is, what are the long-term costs of maintenance for that geothermal solution? If, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, something needed to be fixed, is it complicated? Me knowing nothing about
Sure.
geothermal energy.
He's probably just itching right now behind me.
Is it something that we can
Well-
do in-house, or?
Well, what I would tell you is I do have geothermal in my house. I've had it there for 30 years, probably 32 years now. And I've had really good luck with it. In fact, I just changed my geothermal heat pump out last spring. It was a Climate Master, and it lasted me a long time. The maintenance on those geothermal heat pump systems, they're water cooled, it's really low. I mean, you just don't have much issue with them, because anything that's water cooled, like a piece of equipment like that, is just, it just holds up better. It's kind of like, I always equate it to your car. You know, your car, if you ever had motorcycles that were air cooled they were always junk. Anything that was water cooled was usually pretty good. And that's kind of the way the mechanical system is for a heat pump system, is if you can get it water cooled, it's just so much easier on your equipment. It lasts longer, low maintenance. You're going around changing filters still, but it's a good solid system that I believe in, and I've put in several of them, and the schools that I've put them in, they're real happy with them. I mean, no complaints, good energy savings, low maintenance. And the benefit of a geothermal system is the well filled, that's kind of like what you might call like a cooling tower, or like a chilled water system where you have chillers and stuff. The geothermal well fill will last 70, 80, 100 years maybe. Who knows? Nobody knows yet really, but it's there forever. So when your system starts to fail, and you've got all these water-cooled heat pumps all over the place, because, equipment doesn't last forever, but let's just say 30 years down the road, you say, it's time to change those heat pumps out. You're going to change the pumps in the mechanical room, you're going to change the heat pumps in the ceilings, but that's going to be it. You're not going to go through and change a bunch of piping and go through all the things that you go through with a typical 4-pipe, chilled water, heating hot water system. It's going to be plug and play for you. So
Is it safe to say at a macro level, it would be cheaper to invest in the geothermal over the long term, or over
Definitely.
a traditional heating system?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We did one in McHenry High School, actually. Their East Campus, it was all electric, and they wanted to go to geothermal there, and actually it's under the parking lot there as well. And I will tell you that the facility director there, his background is mechanical. That's kind of what he came from. He loves it. And their energy savings actually far exceeded even what was predicted, which is nice.
He's thrilled with it.
Yeah, he is.
He loves it. Yeah, but like anything, I mean, it's like buying a Tesla or buying any other kind of car that's, any kind of renewable energy. There's always a premium with a payback, but the payback is there. It just takes a little bit, to let it pay for itself. There's usually always a premium associated with these kinds of systems, but the long term is, there's big payback on it.
Well, the tax credit, though, is what's been, I don't know why I called it a tax credit. Obviously, it's not exactly that for you. It has made things like solar, things like geothermal, a very easy financial decision. And we ran savings based on what we have zero doubt you would get, which is about 40% of the cost of the geothermal. And what's nice is the cost of the geothermal is not as simple as just the well field. It is all the components with the equipment. It is, I think you even got ductwork impacted in it when we did it at Silvis. But based on the demographic, there is the potential, this program changes a little bit, it could even be 50%. but the calculations we ran, we wanted to be conservative, so we kept that at 40.
So as far as the credit was concerned, since if the referendum passes, we go forward with this, we're gonna get a credit back on that once it's installed and everything's good to go. That check, would that just go back into the general fund, or does that have to go back to an actual project with regards to the referendum, because that's where the money originally came from? Does it go back into paying down the referendum? How does that side of it work?
So I guess broadly, if the cost of the project was less than we had anticipated, so if we come in under 140 million that we had asked for in the referendum, that money would be abated back to the community because it was
Yes.
for the project.
Okay.
I need to find out the credit where that would go, right? So I don't want to say, oh, the credit is going to bond and interest, or would it be an operating, because it's for future savings?
It is something that the district has the flexibility with. It's kind of like energy savings in that sense, but it's a rebate back from the government. So it ends up being up to how the district thinks it works best for you.
Questions, comments?
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
And
Thank you.
I do want to share with the board as well. So Allied, this was a very short presentation, sort of a high-level overview, but Doug and his team put together an extensive report that we will be sharing with the board and then also be posting publicly on our website. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the opportunity.
Thank you.